All right, students, welcome to another day of math and math problems and Mr. Larson's problems and hopefully Mr. Larson's solutions. I hope today's lesson makes sense, and if not, please reach out, let me know. Let's talk. We've done some things now. We've done some things with numbers. We've now recently done something with the equals sign. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Now we're going to combine the equal sign with fractions and throw a couple words in there just to kind of make it all go together. So here we go. We've talked about the equal sign before. And on this equal sign, it simply means that whatever we have and whatever we describe, when you put the equal sign there and talking about something else, it just means they have to be exactly the same thing. They're exactly the same. So here's some examples. 10 is exactly the same as 5 plus 5. It's also exactly the same as, say, 4.6. 10 is exactly the same thing as 100 divided by 10. 10 is exactly the same thing as 50 divided by 5. Got a whole lot of things. What we're going to do now is having something such as 1/2, and what does that equal to? And figuring out what that is. Some of you might already have some ideas in your mind, but I just kind of want to get you ready for what we're doing. So if I can start with some special kinds of fractions. We have rates and we have ratios. And there's just fancy ways of saying, oh, it's a fraction. But a rate is it's an item divided by an item, and a ratio is something out of something. Here's what I mean. A rate might be something like miles per gallon. Miles per gallon. We've already talked about what per means. Per means divide. So a rate, and another way to write it is miles per, there's the per, miles per gallon. So when you're writing a rate, you're really just writing a fraction. It's just a matter of what number goes on top and what number goes on bottom. Let's say you've got a car, and your car will give you 50 miles per gallon. Well, that's just saying it gives you 50 over 1. That doesn't happen very much, though. Usually, you'll buy a whole bunch of gallons, and then you'll go a whole bunch of miles. So let's say you go 400 miles the last time you filled up, and that was per. Let's say you got 15 gallons. Well, there's the per. It's the exact same item. We just have 400 miles per the 15 gallons. So a rate is simply the miles, the per, the number on the top, the numerator divided by the denominator. Let's say you make a certain number of dollars per hour. Let's say you get a paycheck. And that paycheck, you got $3,000, and you worked for that $3,000. You worked for 80 hours. Well, what is the rate? Well, it's $3,000 divided by 80 hours, and then you can work out and see. Well, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. Just want to leave it as that. That's what a rate is. A ratio, same kind of things, where you're comparing two numbers. You might say, what is the ratio of boys to girls in a classroom? So, boys to girls in a classroom. What's the ratio there? In a classroom, maybe in how many are born, maybe how many are in a class. There's lots of ways you might describe men to women, boys to girls, fruit to vegetables. Fruit to vegetables. What's another one that might come up where you're comparing two things to each other? Maybe candy to drinks. You're looking on a table, you're looking at a spread table, and how many candy to drinks? Now I'm writing the word to here in ratios, but there's other words they might use. A certain amount in a certain amount, or a certain amount by a certain amount, or of, or sometimes you'll see it with a colon. How many cars to trucks? How many? You might see this divide sign right here. How many teachers to students? So these are another way that ratios might be written. Just some words, some symbols, the word to, all of the. Later we're going to be using graphs to describe ratios. But my point is just to let you know, all of these, all they are, everything, an easy way to just say it all is they're fractions. All of these are fractions, just it's a different way to write fractions with ratios and rates. So here we go. Let's say, look at how it just goes right over into it. Let's say we want to talk about an equivalent fraction. I started you off earlier with 1/2. If I want to talk about an equivalent fraction to 1/2, let's see if I can spell it right. That's U after the Q, equivalent fractions. How would you find equivalent fractions? How would you find if one fraction is equivalent to another one? Well, here's what you do. Whatever numbers you're given, you can multiply those two numbers by the same number. Let's say, give me a good number. What number would you say? 3? Okay, 3. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 2 times 3 is 6. I multiplied them both by the same thing, times 3, and I got the same number. Mathematically, what you've done is you've just said 1/2 times 3 over 3. Well, that 3 over 3, we've already learned what that is. That's just 1. You've really just taken the fraction and multiplied it by 1. Mathematically, that's what you've done. It's just another way to write it. You can multiply this by anything you want. Let's say 5. So 3 times 5 and 6 times 5. You have so many fractions that are equal to 1/2. Really, there's an infinite number of them. 50 over 100, 93 over 186. I could just go on forever. 3.2 over 6.4. I could just go on and on and on. 1.5 over 3. I could write these forever and ever. It's just a matter of taking the top and bottom number and multiplying it by the same thing. Okay. Well, what if I've got the number 40/60ths? Just like I multiplied by 1 and got the same thing, I can divide those by the same number and get the same thing. I could divide each of those by, let's say, 10. And I would end up with 4 over 6. It's the exact same concept that I did up here. It simply means that we're just dividing by 1. 40 over 60 divided by 10 over 10, that's just 1. We could go through on how we divide fractions. You flip them over and multiply. But the point is you can divide by the same number and get an equivalent fraction. I'm going to divide both of those by 2 and get 2/3. What if I take 186 over 300? Well, is there an equivalent fraction to that by dividing? Yeah, I could divide them both in half. That becomes 150. And half of 186 is 93. And could I divide that more? If you work it through, you would find that 3 goes into both of those. So that becomes 31 when you divide it by 3 with your calculator. And 150 divided by 3 is 50. I mean, you can just go to town on these fractions. But to find equivalent fractions, all you're simply doing is taking whatever fraction you're given and multiplying by the same number each of those items. So that's rates and ratios, and that's equivalent fractions. There's an activity for you to do. The lesson, if you watched the lesson has an activity there in Savvis that you can work on, Savvis Realize. The assignment today is a little different. You'll find 2 assignments there. Do them both and understand this equivalent fractions. I've gone through a little bit of this concept. If you need anything more, please reach out. Please give me a call, contact me, email me. I'm around. And have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.